Okay, I think we are set and ready to go live here, everybody. Just let everybody filter into the rooms as we get set here. Just waiting for everyone to come on board. Give you a few minutes. I said it was 7:30. We're right at 7:30. So we'll give everybody a few more minutes to join us. But we've got a lot to talk about again. The latest in the saga over the attempt to repeal Proposition 4. We'll talk about that tonight. The lawsuit that was filed by the proponents of the repeal, the group backing the repeal. We'll go through that and what are some of the things that they're arguing and what are the chances and the reason why they're doing that. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that we need to talk about. But as I'm opening up a couple of things in my browser, welcome into the show tonight. My name is Brian Schott. I am the publisher and managing editor of Utah Political Watch, an independent news outlet here in the state of Utah. What does it mean to be independent? Well, it means that I am funded by my viewers. No corporations. I'm not owned by anybody. I'm owned by me. It's owned by me. I am the sole owner. And all of the content you see that is produced, the stories, the videos on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and the social media graphics, all of that is created by yours truly. I do it all by myself, and I enjoy doing it. But I don't have any billionaires telling me what to do, no corporations telling me what to do. I am completely independent. That makes me immune from influence from political agendas, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Because you have to ask yourself these days, who owns your news? Who owns your news? Who is in charge of news? The news that you consume? That's a good question to have. But anyway, I digress. Welcome into the show tonight. If you haven't joined us on the live stream before, I'm going to talk about some of the things that are happening in Utah news, and I want to answer your questions as well. We always get a lot of questions about what's happening with Proposition 4, and that's certainly fair game tonight. Anything else you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. We are live across multiple platforms tonight. We are on YouTube. We are on Facebook. We're on a couple of Facebook channels, actually. We are on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitch. And I see the chat from all of that. So if you have any questions, any comments, anything you want to talk about, please leave it in the chat. This takes me back to when I was a much younger man and working in talk radio in Denver and then out here in Salt Lake City, but mostly in Denver. I worked for a time for the big news talker in Denver, KOA Radio. And I have so many stories from that time. It was fantastic. I was there working as a stadium producer when the Colorado Rockies first started. I spent my summers out at Coors Field for the first couple of years, which is really strange because I am not a huge baseball fan. Not a huge baseball fan at all. But this does take me back to my talk radio days. Although we don't have call-ins, and we had some great call-ins back then. I remember there was a time that I was working on the overnight show in Denver, and it was a gentleman by the name of Rick Barber. He's sadly passed away, but I loved Rick Barber. He was such a great person. And he hosted the program. He hosted a talk radio program from midnight to 5 a.m. in Denver, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And KOA radio, when it was on the FM, on the AM, it was a clear channel station, meaning at nighttime you could hear it in parts of 38 states in Canada. Like, it blasted everywhere. KSL was also, when they were at 11:60 a.m., they were also a clear channel station, and the same thing. But we used to get calls from all over the country. But there was one guy who would call every once in a while. into Rick's show. And he went by the name of MM, the two initials, MM. And MM, he believed that he was in contact with an alien being who was orbiting just outside of Mars named Kakawanda. I am not making this up. And you always knew when MM called in. One of my duties when I was working on Rick's show was to screen calls. So phone would ring, you'd pick it up, you'd say 850 KOA, you want to talk to Rick, and you immediately knew it was MM because he would start off the call with this: "Greetings, Earthling. Hi, MM, how are you?" And then it would just roll on from there. Anyway, this takes me back. I enjoy doing this sort of thing. But anyway, I digress. Let's talk about what's happening in Utah politics. We already have a lot of questions and comments in the chat. The TikTok chat is really busy early, and I appreciate that. Elliot Nutter says, "Hello, Brian. Hope it's been a great Wednesday." Every day's a great day. Another day above ground. You know what? I really can't say every day's a great day. I do enjoy this time, and I get hyped up for doing this, but I think that my philosophy on life is summed up by the old Russian proverb: today is an average day. Worse than yesterday, but better than tomorrow. But I hope that you had a good Wednesday, Elliot. Mikey on TikTok says, "Thank you for everything you do. Your work is appreciated. I'm just a humble scribe, an ink-stained wretch who likes to inform the public." Anyway, so let's get right into it. The first question that I see on the TikTok chat is, do you think the GOP was able to reach the signature threshold? Talking about the effort to put a repeal of Proposition 4 on November's ballot. They haven't gotten there yet, but it's looking more and more likely. They will hit the statewide signature goal tomorrow. They are 86 signatures away. They needed to get statewide 140,748 signatures, and they are at 140,662. So it's just a formality at this point. They will reach the statewide goal. The other goal, the other requirement could be a little more sketchy because in addition to the statewide goal, you also have to get signatures from 8% of voters in 26 of the state's 29 Senate districts. Right now, they're at 14. They've crossed the bar at 14, meaning they need 12 more. We still don't know how many signatures are out there. If you assuming that there's a 75% acceptance rate for the signatures, so all the signatures that they turn in have to be verified. And typical for a large campaign like this is about a 75% acceptance rate, meaning 25% of signatures are thrown out. And assuming that there's a 75% acceptance rate, to get to that 140,662 signatures that have been verified, that means clerks have processed about 187,550, give or take. They said they turned in over 200,000 signatures. Remains to be seen how much above 200,000 it is. But bottom line is they will hit the statewide goal tomorrow. That's going to happen. And they'll probably add a few more Senate districts. But, and as news broke yesterday, and I'm sure that you've read coverage, and I tried to analyze this as well, the backers of this petition drive, a group called Utahns for Representative Government, they have filed suit in state court. And the reason that they have filed suit is because the opponents of this ballot initiative, Better Boundaries, and a group called Utahns for Responsive Government, have engaged in a coordinated signature removal campaign. What they are doing is they are sending what is best described as a signature removal kit to people. It's a targeted campaign to people in certain Senate districts. And what it is it is a form that is already filled out with their name. And all they have to do is sign it. The envelope is pre-addressed to the county clerk, and it has paid and postage is paid. And all the person has to do is sign this form, mail it back into the county clerk to get their name removed from the ballot. And we're going to go over what their claims are in a second. But the reason why they filed suit is because this campaign, and I've crunched the numbers, but this campaign really presents an existential threat to whether or not this ballot initiative is going to get on the ballot. Because what we've seen is at the current verification pace, at the current case we're seeing, the campaign is projected to qualify for the ballot. They will reach that 8% threshold. I think it looks like 27 districts. There are 2 districts that they will not reach that threshold. There are 2 that are a lost cause, but they are projected to cross the 8% threshold in 27 districts. But in several of those districts that they have either crossed or are projected to qualify, there is a targeted signature removal campaign going on. And that could bring them down below the threshold and keep them from getting on the ballot. They can't, if they're projected to hit 27 Senate districts, they can lose one. One of them can fall down below the 8%. But if they lose 2, they're off the ballot. For example, Senate District 13, and that's the seat, it's fairly blue seat, fairly liberal seat, represented by Senator Nate Bluin in the Senate. That one looks like it's going to be the last district to qualify. It's going to barely qualify. But if you look at it, they already have 246 signature removals there, which is the second most of any district. And if this thing qualifies with a very slim margin, it's possible that signature removals could get them to, could drop them below that threshold. And that's not the only district. A few others that I've identified that could be in trouble. Senate District 3, they did qualify today. They did reach that 8% threshold today. And they have a surplus of 125 signatures. Now, they'll keep adding to that as more signatures are verified. But so far, there have been 169 signature removals in that one district alone. That's more than what the surplus was. Stuart Blaine Smiths on Instagram says, wait, I thought the judge threw this out. This is a completely different lawsuit. Completely different lawsuit. This is another issue. This is about signature removals in Proposition 4. So Senate District 3 qualified today, but they've had 169 signature removals, and they only have 125 signature cushion right now. It's possible that a targeted campaign to get people there to remove their signatures would drop them below the threshold. Senate District 10, same math. They have qualified. They have a surplus of 129 signatures, but so far there have been about 174 removals processed. Senate District 16, they're 129 signatures short of qualifying, but they have 218 removals. Senate District 12 needs 158 more signatures to hit 8%, but they're already at 199 removals. And the removals are going to continue beyond the final verification date, which is it's March 9th. They have 21 days from the deadline, which was February 15th. March 9th is the date because the actual date, March 7th, falls on a Saturday. So March 9th is the last day that they can verify these signatures. And then after that, people have a certain amount of time, and I believe it's between 30 and 45 days to remove their signature from the ballot. So this is going to stretch out a while beyond that, and so it's going to be fingernail biting time. And this targeting signature removal campaign really could really threaten whether or not they make it on the ballot. And so that's why they went to court to sue, because this campaign could really impact and stop them from getting on the ballot. What are they claiming in this lawsuit? What are they claiming in this lawsuit? Well, they made a number of claims. The first thing that they're saying is that offering prepaid postage on these forms to remove your signature, offering the prepaid postage is essentially offering to pay voters for removing their signatures. They're offering something of value to the voter to remove their signature, and they're claiming that that is a violation of state law. That's the first thing that's in this lawsuit. The second thing is, since these forms are going to voters who have signed these petitions, the forms are already filled out. They are pre-filled out with the voter's name. They're saying that that violates state law, that the voters have to act on their own when they are requesting that their signature be removed. They are arguing in courts that the voters are not acting on their own because there's a third party who has already filled out these forms for them. So that's the second thing that they are claiming. And then the third thing that they're claiming is that Utahns for Responsive Government and Better Boundaries, they are running a political campaign, but Utahns for Responsive Government has violated state campaign finance laws because they are not registered with the state as a political issues committee, which they need to do. They were a political issues committee back in 2018 and 2019 when they were the group that helped put Prop 4 on the ballot initially, but they closed that account, and they're claiming that, and what the Prop 4 repeal group is claiming is that they are violating state campaign finance laws by not registering with the state. So those are the three main claims in their lawsuit that they filed yesterday. They are asking the judge in the case to order the lieutenant governor and all 29 county clerks to not count any of the signature removals that come in on these pre-filled out forms because of their claims. They're also asking that the county clerks cannot throw away any of these forms. They can't throw away the envelopes. They can't throw away whatever comes in it. They need to preserve that for review down the line. And that is part of if this initiative does not make the ballot, if the signature removals force it off the ballot, they're going to turn this into they're going to go back to court and try to get those signature removals thrown out as illegal and try to force their way on the ballot. Because as I said, we're looking at a situation, and the clerks are expected to be done fairly soon with all of the signatures. A lot of them are chewing through it fairly quickly, and they're hoping to be done in the next few days. We got like 10,000 new signatures added today, and I expect another huge number tomorrow because they're trying to get through these signatures as quickly as possible before the deadline. But if they are somehow forced off the ballot, they're going to try to claim, or I expect them to go back to court and try to litigate this and claim that the signature removals were illegal and those signatures should be put back on the ballot or back on the petitions, and then they will qualify. So this is just all a pretext for legal action down the line if they fail to make the ballot. But that's where we're at right now with this lawsuit and the Prop 4 repeal. So they, as I said before, they will reach the statewide goal tomorrow. They're only 86 signatures short. So it's a formality. They will hit that. And then I expect them to cross the 26 Senate district threshold sometime next week. They'll probably add 3 or 4 more districts, maybe 5 tomorrow, bringing them to 18, between 17 and 19. And that means they will have 7 left to go before the deadline on March 9th. So that's where we're at right now with this whole thing. Anyway, if there are any questions, any comments about that, and I want to know what you think. Do you think that offering free postage, prepaid postage to voters to help them take their name off the ballot, do you think that counts as paying someone for their signature? Do you think that is a legitimate argument? Because that's one of the main things that they are hinging their lawsuit in this case on as it makes its way through court. So I want to know what you think about that. But that's the state of play right there. Claudia Dorsey on Instagram says it's a valuable service to the people of Utah to help them remove their names from something they didn't understand. That possibly. I mean, and there have been a lot of reports that voters were misled when they were signing this. That voters were told that the petition did one thing when it actually did something else. All of that, has been documented. But what do you think about claiming that the price of a stamp is illegal because they're paying you for your signature? They're offering you a payment to take your name off the ballot. It's a curious argument. I don't know if I don't know how. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer. I just try to understand what the filings are once they are made in court. So that's where things sit right now. Let's see. Trying to go through some of the other comments. Let's see. Claudia Dorsey says the people who sent that in, according to common sense, wanted their signatures removed, or they would not have filled out and sent in the removal forms. That's a good argument. That's a really good argument. But did they do it under state law? Did they do it on their own volition? Did they take this action? Again, it's splitting hairs. It really is. This argument is splitting hairs, claiming that they didn't do this on their own because somebody else filled out the form for them. I don't know how the court's going to look at that, but this thing is going to be going for quite some time. Not only past the March 9th final deadline for verifying the signatures, but beyond that, because we're going to see more and more of these removals happening, and maybe it will force better boundaries and Utahns for responsive government to change tactics and get people to go out door to door to get people to remove their signatures. That's what happened in 2018 when the Count My Vote initiative initially had enough signatures to get on the ballot, but then opponents went door to door and got people to fill out forms to take their names off, and they were able to get enough people in 2 Senate districts to take their names off of the petition so that it ended up not qualifying for the ballot that year. Stuart Blaine Smith on Instagram says it's pretty thin. Again, like I said, it was it's a really hair-splitting argument that they are making. Let's see. Looking at some of the comments on TikTok, Mr. Clean says, "Heck, giving a voter a bottle of water was legitimate. Can't believe that." Yeah, in some states they've tried to stop that from voters who were in line. Nicole says, "Definitely doesn't count as paying someone. That money isn't going into anyone's bank account." True, but they didn't have to pay for a stamp. And that's the argument that they're making. Emma Jolo on YouTube. This would be like if you handed out buttons to vote for people. You get the button whether or not you vote for that candidate. But yeah, but that is that again. But it's you're not giving them. It depends on what the value of the button is, I guess. So that's the argument that they are making as they are trying to get on the ballot. But as it stands, they're going to hit that statewide goal tomorrow. We'll get and expect Expect a declaration of victory to come from Republicans and other proponents of taking this or of putting this on the ballot. Expect that to happen tomorrow once they reach the statewide goal. But they're not there yet. That's only half the story. The second half of the story is whether or not they can get the signatures in the Senate districts, and that's what this lawsuit over the signature removals is all about, because you're not going to get enough signature removals to keep it from reaching the statewide goal. That was never the tactic. The tactic was to get signature removals in targeted districts in order to try to drop them below the threshold. And as I explained before, there are a certain number of districts that are going to be on the razor's edge. And people are going to be really sweating this as to whether or not they make it on the ballot or not. Anyway, we are entering the last part of the Utah legislature. I don't know if you saw, but the mail-in voting bill was in committee. I didn't catch the actual or the final vote on that. I'm waiting to see what the final vote on that committee is. But it did pass. Okay, so the mail-in voting bill did pass the committee this afternoon, an 8-3 vote, but they kind of changed it. Initially, this is HB 479 from Representative Jefferson Burton. And initially, what this bill did was it made it so you would get your ballot in the mail. Everyone could get a ballot in the mail, but you would have to return it in person and show ID. That was the original intent of this bill. Well, they substituted it. They changed it. So right now, it makes it so that a voter, if you want to return your ballot by mail, you have to opt into that. If you want to return your ballot in person and show ID, you have to opt into that. So it doesn't make it so that everybody has to return their ballot in person. You can opt into that. And I'm not really sure why they soften this, because I mean, obviously voters are going to have to opt into this every, I believe, 8 years when they renew their driver's license. But I like getting my ballot in the mail and then returning it in the mail. I think it is incredibly convenient, and it led to higher turnout rates. I mean, you cannot dispute that when Utah moved to that system, it led to more voter participation. But then, the election denialism crowd started throwing around baseless and untrue allegations of voter fraud in the 2020 election. There were none, but that hasn't stopped them. Then they've been trying to get rid of Utah's universal mail-in voting ever since. But what happens is the original bill said that you would get your ballot in the mail, and then you would have to return it in person to a polling place and show ID. The new bill, and I'm trying to go over my notes here because I was writing incredibly fast, and I apologize. But you periodically tell the state whether you want to receive your ballots by mail and whether you want to be allowed to return them by mail. But in 2029, unless you make a request, so starting in 2029, unless you make a request, you will not receive your ballot by mail or will be allowed to return your ballot by mail. So you're going to have to make that request if you want to do that, starting in 2029, the 2029 election. So it's going to put more on the voters. The voters are going to have to take the initiative to request that they are allowed to get their ballot by mail and return it by mail. And this is so weird to me, because the reason Utah went to universal vote by mail in the first place is because we're a Republican state, and they wanted to boost turnout by Republican voters. I remember the Democrats were really freaked out about this when the Republicans were first starting to push this. They saw this as a real problem for them because Utah is a majority Republican state. And if you make it easier for people to vote, you're making it easier for Republicans to vote, right? But that's now everything is flipped because Donald Trump lost one election. He lost one election and lost the popular vote in 2016. And now all of a sudden our elections are suspect. Our elections were just fine all the way up until 2016. And then Donald Trump loses the popular vote. And all of a sudden he claims that 3 million people voted illegally. And there's absolutely no proof for that. And then in 2020, he lost straight up. And, now we have to get rid of this thing that works really quite well. Although I do agree, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have to show ID in order to vote, but you show ID when you register to vote. I register to vote when I renew my driver's license, and that's when you'll have to renew your voter registration, and that's when you will have to show proof of citizenship. I mean, it's already caught, and these claims that there are people voting illegally. It's bullcrap. It's 100% bullcrap. I don't know if you remember, but last year, Representative Carrie Ann Lisenby swore up and down. She swore up and down that she had proof, definitive proof, that there were people who were not citizens of the United States who not only had registered to vote in Utah, but cast ballots. A whistleblower came out and told her that this had happened. But when everybody asked to see this evidence, she wouldn't show it to them. She would not show it to them. I asked for I was put in an open records request, got some communications from county clerks to Representative Lisenby. They were saying, hey, can you show us this information so we can fix it? If this is happening, we need to be able to fix it. And she would not show it to them. But trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. We've got undocumented people who cannot, non-citizens, casting votes in elections. Tristan Bills on YouTube says, at some point we have to stop pretending this is a good faith disagreement about voter fraud. Yeah, I agree 100% by that. I agree 100% with that. You cannot treat these as good faith arguments because they're not good faith arguments. Now, there are some people who really believe it. Most of those people have had their brains melted to glass by a constant stream of right-wing misinformation and conspiracy theories. And a lot of them spend a lot of time up at the legislature, are close to a lot of lawmakers, and actually those are some of the people that our lawmakers listen to. So if the lawmakers haven't had their brains melted to glass, the people that they're paying attention to have had their brains melted to glass by this constant stream of conspiracy theory. But I agree with Tristan on this. It's not a good faith argument anymore. It's really not. There's no evidence. And I've seen a lot of Republican lawmakers cite this study by the Heritage Foundation that Utah's elections are some of the least secure in the country. But the Heritage Foundation also has shown studies saying that it's not happening. There are not non-citizens voting in elections. I don't know where the middle ground is because I think it's a losing argument to say that you are against voter ID. There are some cases, I understand there's some people who, for one reason or another, might not be able to produce ID or have access to proof of citizenship. I understand that, but I don't know where the middle ground is. I think there's a middle ground in there because I think it's a losing argument to say that we shouldn't have to require voter ID. This whole thing would go away if people would agree that we have to show voter ID. Now, not go to the links that Senator Mike Lee is proposing with the SAVE Act. And if you understand where that thing came from, that came directly from the mind of Cleta Mitchell, who was one of Trump's lawyers in 2020. She was on that infamous phone call to Georgia, just find me 11,000 votes. And she has spent the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years, trying to push voter suppression by floating these outrageous conspiracy theories. And she is really close to Mike Lee. If you remember on the January 6th report, she and Mike Lee were texting back and forth about trying to find a way to not certify Joe Biden as the winner of that election. So, you can't go that far, but I also think that it looks really strange. You're handing a lot of ammunition over to people who are making bad faith arguments by saying, this is a bad idea to require voter to require ID when voting. I don't know what the answer is, but it just seems like you're allowing them or you're giving them some points by pushing back against this, even though they are making these arguments in bad faith. Even though these arguments are in bad faith, it just seems like there's some way to find that's not making it look like you are against voter ID, because what happens is if you come out against voter ID, well, you're in favor of letting non-citizens vote, which is not the argument. But anyway, I digress. All right, let me see if I can go through some of the comments that are here. Let's see. Trying to look on Instagram first. Kirsten Can on Instagram says, so you have to be registered to be sent a ballot, but to drop it off, you need ID. So dumb, and makes it so you can't drop off your family's ballots. Yeah, that's part of it. Although this bill, it has softened quite a bit. This is the second year in a row where they've tried to get rid of mail-in balloting, and then they've had to back way off. You remember they tried to do the same thing last year, and it was Jefferson Burton with House Bill 300. That bill tried to end universal mail-in voting, the same thing that this one tried to do this year, which was you would get your ballot in the mail, but then you'd have to drop it off in person. And then they had to back off it because there was pushback from county officials, and the amount of money that the counties would have to spend, because these drop boxes for ballots would have to be manned. 12 hours a day, because you would not be able to drop in your own ballot. You have to show ID, and only the person who's manning the ballot box could drop it in after checking your name off and checking your ID. And it would have had a tremendous cost to it. And I think Salt Lake County was looking at a couple of $1,000,000 is what it would cost for the staffing to do that. So they backed off it last year, and then they brought it back this year, and then they backed off it again this year, and softened the bill significantly. It's the legislature going off without completely considering the ramifications of their actions, which is what happens a lot. So anyway, let's see. Going through here on TikTok, and I'll get to some of the other platforms as well. Let me see. Nicole says, so they can pay people to go door to door and lie, but stamps to mail in removal is wrong. It's legal to pay someone to get signatures. One of the things the legislature did after 3 ballot initiatives made the ballot in 2018, that was the medical cannabis, the Medicaid expansion, and Prop 4, is they made it so that you could not pay signature gatherers by the signature for ballot initiatives or referendums. You could only pay them hourly, which at the time I was kind of flabbergasted that the legislature, this capitalist legislature, was mandating how companies could pay their employees. That seemed like an outrageous government intrusion into the private sector. But they passed that. It does not apply to candidates. Candidates can still pay via signature. You can offer, however many signatures that you get that you turn in, and that's what the paid signature gatherers are. So they're allowed to do that. Let me see. Looking over here, Annette McCrae said on Facebook says we just have to show ID to vote. Yeah, in person. Yeah, I remember that. I'm old enough. I voted in every election since I was 18. So yeah, I remember that as well. Looking up a bill here before I address a comment on it to make understand what it would look. I think we're talking about Senate Bill 3. No, let me see. Yes. Okay, yes. There is a comment, and I wanted to get to this in a second, but this is on TikTok. Unfortunately, I can't see your entire username, and I apologize on TikTok, but it says SB 308 withdrawn, no gerrymandered courts. Today is a great day. That is Todd Weiler's bill. SB 308 that would have split the state into 4 judicial districts, the North, the South, I think the East and the West. Right now we have 8 judicial districts. It would have split it into 4. He withdrew that because essentially that would have allowed the assigning of judges from areas like the first judicial district is pretty much right here in Salt Lake City, and I think the third is in West Valley. I don't have the judicial districts memorized, but moving from 8 districts down to 4 means that you could assign cases that normally would be here in Salt Lake City to judges in more rural areas of the state. And that would have caused a number of problems, and Todd Weiler has withdrawn that. So yes, you are 100% right on that. Let's see. Tony Rossi, the legislature has never met an unfunded mandate for the counties that it didn't like. True. Especially when it comes to Salt Lake County. They love to intrude on what the counties are doing and mandate it without telling them how they're going to pay for it. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're backing off on this idea with the vote by mail. Like I said, the bill has made it so that starting in 2029, you're going to have to make a request. And I think it's for every election, whether or not you're going to get your ballot by mail and mail it back in. I'm old enough to remember that there was a time that the state was literally flirting with online voting. I think Senator Kurt Bramble was trying to get a pilot program for online voting. And then in 2016, I believe, the Utah Republican Party decided to run their presidential caucus with an online vote. And pardon my French, that was an absolute shit show. I don't think we really even know who won that yet. It might have been Ted Cruz, but it was a complete disaster. It was so bad. There were lawsuits, and I've written about this for a number of years. I remember when it happened. It was just a total meltdown of the system because it wasn't secure and they didn't know who was voting. It was really hard to check your credentials if you were a Republican voting. It was a complete disaster. But somebody, I think that somebody offered someone some money, or they were trying to run it as a pilot program. But that shut that stuff down real quick. Even though there are countries that do this. I think Estonia is a country that they are one of the most online countries in the world, and now obviously we're not we're much larger than Estonia, but I do know that they have fully embraced technology. I'm not comparing us to Estonia, but I remember that the legislature was for the longest time flirting with voting online, and they swore that they could be able to do it. And the 2016 Republican presidential preference vote, or whatever the hell it was, online, it was such a disaster that we're not coming back to that again. That's just not going to happen. Claudia on Instagram says, why doesn't our legislature just focus on a few important issues instead of trying to cover 1,000 bills in one session? Well, you've got 104 people up there, and all of them want to try, and all of them have things that they want to address. I think we're over almost 1,020 bills that have been and resolutions that have been introduced this session. I did write earlier this week about the people who had the most bills defeated so far this year. As of Tuesday morning, now I'm sure these numbers have gone up, and I haven't looked through the entire list yet because that is kind of time consuming and I have other stuff to do today. But as of Tuesday morning, there were 130 bills that had passed completely through the legislature. On Tuesday morning, there were 1,000 bills that had been numbered, 1,000 bills and resolutions that had been numbered. 130 had passed, and 92 bills were either voted down on the floor in a Senate or in a committee, or held in a committee, or tabled in a committee. The person, as of, again, a couple of days ago, the person leading the way with the most pieces of legislation that had died was Democratic Representative Andrew Stoddard. He had 6 bills, and I think he was at the top of the list last year when I did this. 2 of his bills were actually voted down. HB 80, which imposed some criminal penalties for improper firearm storage, that was voted down, and HB 443, which changed how legislative vacancies were filled, that was also voted down. The rest were held in committee. Right behind him, though, is Representative Trevor Lee of Layton. 5 bills so far are either dead or stalled. HB 288, that allowed people to register to vote when they were renewing their hunting or fishing license. That was that actually cleared the House. That was passed through the House. But when it went over to the Senate, he tried to add on a provision that would have allowed the lieutenant governor to contract with a private firm to inspect our voter rolls. But it wasn't just the voter rolls. They were going to turn over a whole bunch of other information to this private firm. And this is just a rehash of something Carrie Ann Lisenby tried to do last year. She had a bill last year that would have, it had a provision that was specifically written for a person, this one firm that is an election denier who's funded by Mike Lindell. She wrote a provision in her bill, and what it would have done is it would have turned over voter roll information and Medicaid applications and property records and driver's license records and a whole bunch of information. And then this person, his name is Jay Valentine. He had this stuff. He has a technology that he claims is fractal technology. And what he claims it does is he can take all of these pieces of information and then identify places where there's voter fraud, where there are people who are voting that don't live there, or they're getting ballots. Anyway, it's his quote unquote technology was initially funded by Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy. Gave him a bunch of money for it. He pitched this in Texas as well. The reason I know it was Jay Valentine is because I have screenshots of social media posts of one of the state's biggest election deniers talking about how she had set up a meeting at the state capitol, with Jay Valentine, where he sat down and met with Carrie Ann Lisenby and House Speaker Mike Schultz. So if you wonder where a lot of this election stuff is coming from, just consider the fact that House Speaker Mike Schultz took a meeting with a guy who claims he has some magic technology that roots out voter fraud that has not been proven to work anywhere. So when you hear him talking about election integrity, again, you can't assume it's a good faith argument because he's listening to election conspiracists. That's just the truth. That's just the truth of the matter. But that bill, he put that provision in before it went over to the Senate, and the Senate was like, no, we're not going to do that. And so they tabled it. And then he's had a bunch of bills held in committee as well. His bill, what was it, HB 152, which made it easier to for parents to get a vaccine exemption in public schools. That was held. HB 96, which would have had over-the-counter ivermectin. That was also held. So yeah, he's second, right behind Andrew Stoddard, which is interesting. It's really interesting to see a Republican that high up on the list. In the Senate, it's two Democrats who have seen the most pieces of legislation that have either been that have been stopped. Nate Bluin and Jen Plum have each had 3 bills. So yeah, but back to the original point. Why doesn't the legislature just focus on a few important issues? Well, you've got 104 people, and they are duly elected representatives, and their job is to propose and pass legislation. Now, there is a bill from Representative Ryan Wilcox, and it also changes the Constitution, that instead of one 45-day session in January, starting in January and going to March, he is proposing 3 15-day sessions. A budget session that would be in February, then a policy session, I believe, in May, and then another one in September. 15 days only. That's the only time that you can work on policy bills. But although you could work on policy issues in the budget session if you can get a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate. Now, the thing that I like about this proposal is right now we have a 45-day session, but they don't work weekends. Weekends don't count. Holidays don't count. So they're really up on the hill for maybe 33 days, 32 or 33 days. This one, the 15 days would only be weekdays. So it would be 15 days 3 times a year. So it would be the 45 days. So we'd be getting our money's worth in that. I'll have to look into where that bill is right now. But let's see. Looking at some of the other comments here. There's a lot of them. TikTok is very active tonight, and I appreciate that, but it's hard for me to keep up. Let me see. Emerald on TikTok says, I always assume the legislature's fight on mail-in voting started with Trump's beef with it in 2020. Yes, that's when it started. But the Republicans in the legislature, the Republican Party, were the ones who pushed us to go to universal mail-in voting, universal absentee voting, because default absentee voting, because we are a Republican state. And so if you make it easier for people to vote, you're going to make it easier for more Republicans to vote. But part of the problem is you get casual voters involved. And Senate President Stuart Adams made a comment to me once that has always stuck with me. I was talking to him. One of the things that Representative Rebecca Chavez Houck was able to do before she left the legislature, she pushed through the same-day voter registration. She had been fighting for that for years. And right before she was due to leave the legislature, she got it passed. And then Republicans kind of want to get rid of that. They were looking at changing that just a couple of years later. And I spoke to Senate President Stuart Adams. I think at that time he was the majority whip. And I said, why would you want to do this? And he said, and I'm aggressively paraphrasing here, but the gist of it was, we want to make sure the right people are voting. They don't want casual voters. They want engaged voters. You know, the people who go to your caucus meetings. That's who they want voting. So anyway, Emma Jolo on YouTube says, is it your opinion that these guys really believe that there is voter fraud, or do you think they're doing this cynically because they are unpopular? I think that there are a number of them who are true believers. I'm pretty sure that Carrie Ann Lisenby is a true believer about voter fraud. Trevor Lee, sure. I'm sure there's quite a few of them. I am becoming more and more convinced that Mike Schultz is, because he is fairly steeped in these far-right circles, or at least has enough tangential connections to it. I don't think that Stuart Adams is. I don't think, I think that's why some of this stuff when it goes over to the Senate, it doesn't go anywhere. But the House is obviously much more reactionary than the Senate. And so I think that there are a number of true believers. And then there are other ones who just, this is what the party does, so we're all going to do it. Right. I guess that's my answer to that. Let's see. Random, I'm sorry, I can't see your entire username. Oh, there we go. Random Quaka on TikTok says, last Republican caucus had zero improvement. That was, the 2024 Republican caucus was an absolute disaster. I don't know if it's going to get any better this year, but I'm excited to find out, and I will be there. It's also the same day that my case is being argued in front of the 10th Circuit Court in Denver. I'm not going to be there for it. I'll probably be watching it online, but so I'm gonna have a really fun day where I get to watch these legal arguments about whether or not I can, whether or not the legislature is violating my First Amendment rights by refusing to give me a press pass. And then that evening, I'm going to go hang out with a bunch of Republicans at the Republican caucus. So I'm really excited about that whole thing. It's going to be a very, very exciting day for me because why? I'm a civics nerd. I love that sort of thing. Let's see, looking at some of this, let me see. I'm trying to look at some of these comments here as we go through here. Over on YouTube and Facebook. Let's see, going back up a little bit here on YouTube. Gabriel on YouTube says, the issue is that voting uniquely requires both trust and anonymity. With banking or exams, you only need trust. And then there was a reply that says, voting isn't anonymous. How do you see it that way? Well, your vote is secret. That is a constitutionally guaranteed thing. And that's part of one of the reasons why when Representative Phil Lyman was trying to get a hold of this thing from the 2020 election called the cast vote records, if you would have gotten this information from the voting machines that he wanted to get his hands on, you could probably figure out how a person voted in the election because it was raw voting machine data and you would have been able to figure that out. So there was a constitutional issue and it would have violated your right for an anonymous ballot. Serald66 on YouTube says, is Representative Ryan Wilcox a bill mill? I don't think he proposes the most bills up there. I think that's Senator Wayne Harper. He always has a ton of them, and they're always very dense and dealing with tax issues. I think he's Stuart Adams' go-to guy on tax issues, or on at least on municipal tax issues and a lot of the transportation issues. But I don't think that you could call. He's no more of a bill mill than anybody else. I know Todd Weiler always has a ton of bills up there. It used to be that they would sit on him until the last minute. There used to be so much more game playing with bills. Now there's a rule that a bill has to have 2 committee hearings in order to pass. It used to be that what would happen is they would take a bill and have 1 committee hearing, and then the sponsor would sit on it until the committee hearings were over and then push it through at the very last second. Well, they stopped that because a lot of people started to complain. But to say that he's a bill mill, I don't think that's true. There are people who propose more legislation than he does. Nathan Detroit on Twitch, he's one of our subscribers. Hey, Nathan, how are you this evening? He says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Trevor Lee. And now I might have to make the graphic of Trevor Lee as Michael Scott. Now the mind is racing, so I'll have to figure out a way to do that. Because that's the kind of thing that makes me laugh. It entertains myself. On TikTok, Emerald Dragonfire says, I always assume the legislature's fought on mail. We already talked about that earlier. Sorry, I saw an earlier one. Here it is. Glenn's Irish Setters on TikTok says, I've read that we have the shortest legislative session of any state. We have one of the shortest. I think that there's one that's shorter than what we have, or a couple, because they only meet every other year. Before 1984, Utah actually had 2 legislative sessions. On odd number years, we would have a budget session that was 20 days long. And then on even number years, we would have a policy session, which I believe was 30 or 40 days long. So the legislature would only meet, they would meet for the budget one year, and then policy stuff the next year. But the policy stuff kept sneaking into the budget session. And that's why they had the constitutional amendment in 1984 to move to one 45-day session. And they also had to make it so that the 45-day session would be every year. But yes, it is one of the shortest in the country. And they love to talk about how they are part-time legislators, and they proudly wear the badge of being a part-time legislature. But I did write a story earlier this session about how they're in line for a pay raise. Right now they get $306 a day, and it's going to go up to $319 a day, I believe. And the pay raise is going to go into effect automatically unless they vote it down. But the commission that sets those pay rates actually did a survey of lawmakers, sent out a questionnaire, an anonymous questionnaire, and there were a lot of them who were complaining about how little they got paid for how much time they put in to the job. So that's sort of the push and pull of that. Random Quokka says Trevor Lee seems more like a Jeremy Jam than Michael Scott. True. Yeah. Elliot Nutter says, any thoughts on the State of the Union? I didn't see Mike Lee slinking along. Unfortunately, I didn't watch the whole thing. I was actually at the Delta Center for the Brandi Carlile concert, which was really good. My wife is a huge Brandi Carlile fan, and I always enjoyed tagging along. And I thought it was a really good show. It was a fun show. There was a lot of anger, but there was she has some. Anyway, I won't give you my full review of the show. I'll just say that it was a good time. I enjoyed it. I've seen clips of the State of the Union. I'm glad I didn't sit through the whole thing. That kind of would have been painful. Elliot Nutter said I didn't watch it because I was at David Archuleta's book tour. Yeah, I think a lot of people had better things to do than sit through the State of the Union. And in our media culture right now, you don't need to watch it because everybody's going to clip the big moments, and they'll find their way around like that. So let's see, trying to go through a few more comments here before we finish up the live stream for this evening. Monte Hamilton on Instagram says, what do you think of the Forward Party? I think what they're trying to do is interesting. It's really hard to explain where they come down politically because they could be all over the place. They don't have a national platform. The party and its individual parties decide which issues are important to them through a preference poll. And then the candidates get to propose, their solutions or how they would address those issues, but they're not locked into one thing. It's not like if you're a Democrat, you're expected to be pro-life, a pro-choice, and a Republican, you're expected to be pro-life. It doesn't split like that. And it's when I was first trying to write about it, it was kind of brain breaking because it's really hard to explain that without writing 15, 16 paragraphs. So I think what they're trying to do is interesting. I don't know if America is ever going to get to the point where a third party is viable. Yes, they have someone in the legislature now. Emily Buss is in the state Senate, but she's only there because Senator Daniel Thatcher switched from the Republican Party to the Forward Party. And then when he retired, the Forward Party got to pick his replacement. I did like the way that they picked his replacement, where they opened up the vote to everybody in the district, not just delegates of the Republican or the Democratic Party, which is how they do it now. Right now, if you're going to fill a vacancy in the legislature for a Republican or a Democrat midterm, you only have to win, a couple dozen votes. That's it. You just have to convince some delegates. That's how Representative Kristen Chevrier is there. She is there because Brady Brammer got reelected to his seat knowing full well that he was going to run to replace Mike Kennedy in the Senate after Mike Kennedy resigned his seat when he got elected to Congress. And Representative Chevrier won that delegate election. And I think she went somewhere around 30 or 40 votes is all it took to win. And that's how you get people who are, she is probably one of the most, she's a vaccine conspiracy theorist. She had a group here in Utah called Vaccine Free Utah. She was very prominent during the vaccine wars during COVID. But she didn't have to win the seat by convincing a larger universe of Republican voters to give her the nomination. She had to convince 30 or 40 Republican delegates. And now she's the incumbent running for re-election. So that's how it happens. Gabriel on YouTube says, what are the odds Senator Buss keeps her seat the next cycle? I think it's going to be really hard. There are a lot of Republicans who are lining up for that. John, I'll pull up the list here real quick, but I know former Representative John Notwell really wants that seat, and he's been raising money for a while to do that. But let me pull up my list. I know I've got my candidate trackers here somewhere. There it is, my Senate candidate tracker. You've got John Notwell, you've got Chris Sloan, Brooks Benson. So there's 3 Republicans who are running for that seat. Notwell has the support of a lot of Republican leadership in the Senate. He's a former, I think he was the assistant majority whip in the House before he stepped down. When he stepped down, that led to Candace Paparucci ascending to the House because she won the special election to replace him. So it's going to be really tough for her to hold onto that seat because, again, that is a Republican area. It has elected a Republican the last couple of elections. And she's not a Republican. And there's a big advantage to having that R behind your name. Speaking of which, let me pull up the bill because I want to find out what happened to it today. There we go. HB 558 from Representative Ryan Wilcox. There we go. Gabriel, this is his bill. But what it would do is it would require an election officer to post the political party, the political affiliation of the candidate, regardless of whether the candidate is a candidate for partisan or nonpartisan office. His original version was going to put the party that they belong to in judicial retention elections as well. I don't know if it says it needs to be on the ballot, but they have to post it online. And I think the original version of the bill, I'm pulling that part up right now. Let me look at the original version of the bill. So originally what Representative Wilcox wanted to do is when you filed to run for an office, whether it was a partisan office or a nonpartisan office, the county clerk would have to post online the political affiliation of that candidate, and essentially would turn nonpartisan elections into partisan elections. It wouldn't have that R on the ballot, obviously. You wouldn't have the partisan affiliation on the ballot, but it would be online and everyone would know if someone was a Republican or a Democrat when they were running. And he wanted to make it for judicial retention elections as well. So when you go in and you're researching the judges, you would see which political party they belong to. Well, his new version of the bill exempts judges from that, but it still keeps that for partisan and nonpartisan office. So it's just another step towards making every election in Utah a partisan election, even in the municipal elections, which are supposed to be nonpartisan. But that bill did pass through a committee today, and it's one of those bills that was just made public a couple of days ago. And now it's already through a committee and onto the floor as we are running through the last part of the session. It's going to be wall-to-wall committee hearings probably starting Monday, because Tuesday is the last day, and maybe it's just Tuesday morning that they will have committee hearings, because Tuesday is the last day that you can that the House can consider House bills and the Senate can consider Senate bills. So Tuesday is the last day. If a House bill does not pass out of the House by Tuesday, it's dead. If a Senate bill does not pass out of the Senate by Tuesday, the end of Tuesday, it's dead. So we're coming up on the deadline, and you're going to see a lot of bills get pushed through. And we are entering the part where bills, they're going to get maybe a minute of consideration on the House and Senate floors because they're trying to push so much legislation through. But that's just how this works. Looking here. Random Quack on TikTok says some things should remain nonpartisan. I don't want city council being politicized. It won't be on the ballot, but it'll certainly be on whatever the public information is. Gabriel says, I thought 558 got held in committee. I'm actually looking at the bill right now. And the status, you're right, it was held in committee. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. I was looking at the substitute, and then it was held. So that one was held in committee. You are right, and I stand corrected. Didn't see that one quickly. But that was one that I had my eye on because I was really fascinated by the concept and was interested to see what they were going to do with that. So yes, that one did get held. Thank you for correcting me on that. There's so much legislation that it's really hard to keep on track of everything. Let me see. Claudia Dorsey says, I'm wondering what you think of the Cox-Trump plan to save the Great Salt Lake. I appreciate that everyone is, talking about saving the Great Salt Lake, but we've been talking about it for a long time. And now we're starting to hit the lower, water levels are going down. And, I'm not an expert on this. I don't know how long before things get extremely dire. I'm assuming they're pretty dire right now. The dust that's being kicked up right now is awful. My allergies are just killing me daily. There are times I can't even go outside because my eyes burn so much from that dust. But what do I think of that of their plan? I hope they're serious about it. I really do. I hope it's not just talk. But also, President Trump does not have the greatest track record on following through with these things. So you have to wonder if he's got a plan or if he's got concepts of a plan, or whether he's going to forget about it. Because one of the things that we've learned about the president is, he basically takes the position of the last person he talked to. And at the same time that we're trying to fight to get water is going to be such a huge issue in the western part of the United States. I mean, I'm glad we got some snow, but we need a lot more, and I don't know if we're going to get it. And I think people in Arizona and California and in New Mexico are going to have a life-changing summer. It's not going to be great for them. It's not going to be great for us either. Lady of the Great Salt Lake on TikTok says, we expect to reach a new record low this year for the lake. Yeah, it's pretty dire. It's bad. Glenn's Irish Setter says most of the water is used to grow alfalfa. Yeah, there's a large portion of that goes for agriculture, for a very water-intensive crop. And what does Governor Cox grow? Alfalfa. I remember I tried to ask him that at one of his governor's press conferences, and he did not like that question. He did not like that question at all. Lady of the Great Salt Lake says, again, we are getting less than 10% of our typical water. That's bad. I mean, it is really, really bad. But, this is what happens when you ignore a situation until it becomes a crisis. I know that former House Speaker Brad Wilson tried to make this his signature issue. And it was the issue that that was going to propel him to the Senate. And now he's head of the Olympics and the big, Salt Lake Symposium we have every year. It's dwindling. I mean, people are losing focus. So I'm glad that the focus has been turned back on it, because it needs it desperately, because the Salt Lake, I mean, if that, I don't think they've ever reversed, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's ever been a situation where they've reversed the decline of a saline body of water inland, a Salt Lake. I know there's one out in California, and I think that one went dry. They might have tried to fix that, but a lot of it is, I don't think they've ever been able to reverse it. And it's not just, I mean, it's going to have a huge impact on us, but also wildlife, all the birds that use that as a place to stop on their migration. I mean, it affects everything. And I just don't know. I mean, it is a terrifying thing to think about. I mean, I'm glad people are talking about it, but we have to have action. And action is going to require some really hard decisions to make. And one of the things that politicians in America, for the most part, is they lack the courage to make those hard decisions. They don't want to do it because they're going to upset some people, because they want to stay in office. They want to continue to get elected. And when you have staked your flag on the fact that climate change is not impacted by by human activity, it's really hard to shift course. And a lot of people would have to admit that they're wrong, and they're not going to do that. Lady of the Great Salt Lake, and again, I'm going to give her a shout out on TikTok because she covers these issues a lot better than I ever could. So if you want to keep up on what's happening with the lake, that's her username on TikTok, Lady of the Great Salt Lake. Go over there and follow her. She says, basically, we stopped the decline of the Mono Lake and have stabilized it. I believe that's the Mono Lake in California, but have yet to restore it to its target level. It's scary. I'm glad people are talking about it, but it's got to turn into action, and action is going to require tough decisions and sacrifice. And there's one thing we learned during COVID, there's one thing that Americans are not really good at, is sacrificing. We are an incredibly decadent society, and that decadence is coming back to bite us in the butt. So, I mean, there's a lot of talk, and I hope they do something about it, but I'm really worried. I am really worried. So anyway, I think that's probably going to do it for me tonight on this live stream. I appreciate your time. Again, more and more people keep joining us every single time, and I like it. I like having these questions. I like talking about these issues. I like explaining things. I didn't even get to talk about the lawsuit filed by Kalshi against Utah. Let's reverse and talk about that for half a second. Let's talk about, because this is another big deal. This is a big deal because this is going to have some far-reaching impacts on the state. So I'm not done yet. We're going to talk about, I just looked down at my notes, the lawsuit that Kalshi has filed against the state. And if you are not familiar with what Kalshi is, that is an online prediction market where you can, people are talking about how they don't, it's technically not gambling, but it's gambling, where you can go on these markets. Kalshi Polymarket, that's the name of the group. That's the name of the apps. And you can buy a contract on whether or not something's going to happen. It could be a political event. It could be an economic event. It could be a sporting event. And it's a yes or no question. It's always a yes or no. Will this thing happen? Yes or no. And you can buy contracts on yes or buy contracts on no. And if something is like, if yes is trading at 30% and no, if yes is trading at, one yes contract is 30 cents, then, and a no contract is at 70 cents, well, then the current odds are that the market has determined that there's a 30% chance of it happening. Okay. So that's what Kalshi and Polymarket are. Governor Cox and Attorney General Derek Brown, they have been saber rattling against Kalshi and these prediction markets, because Utah has a constitutional ban against gambling. That's why we'll never get the lottery in the state. Constitutionally, it's baked into our constitution. We cannot gamble. And they are claiming that Kalshi, these prediction markets, violate the state's ban on gambling, because you can buy a contract on sporting events. College football is one of them. Will this team win the game? Yes or no? Now, you're not betting against the house. This is where it's different. It's not like a casino. It's not like a casino bet. You're not betting against the house. You're betting against other users. For every yes contract, there is always a corresponding no contract. And so what happens is when the event happens or doesn't happen, if it does happen, the people holding the yes contracts get money. And if it doesn't happen, the people holding the no contracts get money and the other side loses money. Now, as I said, Governor Spencer Cox, Attorney General Derek Brown, they've been saber rattling against these prediction markets because they say they violate the state's ban on gambling. And I think there's a pretty strong argument to be made against that, a pretty strong argument for that. Well, Kalshi on Monday ran to court and preemptively filed a lawsuit to block the state from taking action against them. They pointed to comments that were made by the governor and attorney general, saying that they were getting ready to take an action against the state. Now, this is the first time that Kalshi has sued a state before they took action against them. This is the first time that they've done that. They've been sued by other states, but they've been sued by other states, but this is the first time they've preemptively sued. Nathan Detroit says Kalshi takes a vig on each bet. Is that correct? Yes, that's how they make their money. So they're asking for a judge to step in and rule that Utah cannot treat their exchange like illegal gambling, and they want to block the state from taking any action. Now, here's where it gets muddy. Online prediction markets are governed by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, CFTC. And Congress has given that's the body that regulates these markets. And they've already come out and said that they are the CTFC has already come out and said that they are going to aggressively push back against states attempting to regulate these markets, because they're saying that is 100% the role of the federal government, and the Supremacy Clause says states cannot block these prediction markets because because Congress already gave them the power to regulate it. So it's a Supremacy Clause issue. And we also have another bill that's going through the session right now, HB 243 from Representative Joseph Ellison, and I wrote about this one. And this one would ban proposition bets. It bans prop bets to the state's laws against gambling. Now, a prop bet is a little bit different than the prediction market. And that's how things like apps like DraftKings and those daily fantasy sports have been gotten around Utah's ban on gambling, because it's a proposition bet. It's technically not gambling. At least that's what they say. But this is going to be a big fight. Colin Ford on YouTube. Hey, Colin, I haven't heard from you in a while. Appreciate you chiming in. He says, can we now put money on the Kalshi lawsuit? A lot of people have been wondering whether they should open a market on that. But here's the problem. So this is all setting up a fight between the federal government and Utah. But you also have to understand that the Trump administration is all in on these prediction markets. Donald Trump Jr. His venture capitalist firm, or his venture capital firm, made a big investment into Polymarket, which is one of these prediction markets last year, sorry. And he's been hired as a strategic advisor for Kalshi, so he's involved with both companies. And Truth Social is rolling out their own online prediction market called Truth Predict. So there's a lot of financial incentive by members of the Trump family to not regulate these markets. And it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out. But Kalshi just decided that they were going to preemptively jump in front of Utah to keep them from regulating these markets. The thing about it that has really appalled me is that Substack announced that they are getting in bed with Kalshi and putting prediction markets as part of the news. And I think CNN was going to do something with them as well. That's some bull crap right there. I mean, this is not news, but it could drive the news. You know, I mean, these platforms already are rife with allegations of insider trading. There was a story back in January that some anonymous user, I believe on Polymarket, bought pocketed $400,000 after buying a bunch of contracts on one of the prediction markets that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro would be ousted. And those bets came just hours before the U.S. raid that captured him. And this anonymous user pocketed like $400,000. That's flat out corruption right there. But these are supposed to be regulated. Part of the problem, a lot of the growth in these prediction markets, analysts have said it comes from 18 to 20-year-olds because they can't gamble. 18, 20-year-olds cannot gamble. They can't use the online gambling apps, but they can use these markets because in most cases, these markets are open to people 18 or older. And as we know, it creates addictive behavior. Gambling can be a predictive behavior. So I'm going to be absolutely fascinated to see how this lawsuit plays out, where the state has this constitutional ban on gambling, but Kalshi's going to the court to say we're not gambling. We are a prediction market. We are a prediction platform. So anyway, I think that's a very fascinating thing that's going to happen. It's something for you to watch as we go forward on this. Okay, so now we got that. I wanted to talk about that before we finished up tonight. So I think we're going to finish. It's about 9 o'clock now, and I got to get up early and do this all over again. If you want to know when we do these live streams, I always send out an email blast before they happen, the day of. Go to my website. It's on the screen, utahpolitics.news, and you can sign up for my newsletter for free, and you'll get that in your email box. As I said at the beginning, I'm an independent journalist, so nobody owns this platform. I own this platform, and I'm responsible for everything. And if you want to support what I do, I don't have a corporation backing me. I don't have a billionaire backing me. It's me. It's my readers. And if you appreciate what I do and you want to support me, you can throw me a couple bucks in the tip jar. It's at the website, or you can become a subscriber. Brandon on TikTok says, will the state come after daily fantasy sports? They already are. It's HB 243. That one has already passed the House. It's passed through a Senate committee. It's going to go to the Senate floor. It will pass. So yeah, the state is going to ban daily fantasy sports. That's going to happen. That was a loophole that they were getting through when the state banned sports gambling. So they're getting rid of the daily fantasy sports. That's pretty much the end of that, unless somehow they claim that they're regulated by the federal government. I don't know how this is going to play out, but the Kalshi decision that I talked about earlier could have some far-reaching implications for the state. Anyway, that's going to do it for this evening. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you want to find out when we do this again, sign up for my newsletter. It's at utahpolitics.news. That's free. If you want to support what I do as an independent journalist, The tip jar is there on the website. You can also become a paying subscriber. You get some free stuff if you do that. But again, thank you so much for your attention and your time tonight. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, if there's something you'd like for me to address in a future live stream, send me a DM on this app, whichever app you're watching on. Make sure to give me a follow as well. I appreciate that. And we might have one of these on Friday. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with the legislature, if there's some big news that comes out of it. We might have one on Friday, or we'll have another one next week. But until then, thank you so much for your time and your attention. And we will talk to you later.